Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of Unscripted and Unchained RPG Review. I am DM Bluddworth, and as you can see by the graphics, today's video is actually a re-recording of Master of the Game Principles and Techniques for Becoming an Expert Role-Playing Game Master by Gary Gygax. So if you saw the original video that I did with this, you certainly had a difficulty hearing it, and I apologize for that. I had a bit of a mix-up between mics, and I had the wrong mic on while I ran through that, and I just didn't have time during the week to address that, to address that issue. So for those of you that suffered through that first one, I apologize. I hope you were able to get through it. But if you weren't, here's a second try at just getting a better output, volume output for it. So we'll jump right back into where it is. I'll probably have a slightly different analysis of it, but still haven't changed my mind very much about it. But I'll probably be just more succinct and and clear about my thoughts on this part of the chapter. So I'm switching views, and so what is a master GM? So that's what I'm going to deal with first, because that was in that first video, and the second part I dealt in the second video, so I'm not going to rehash that too much. But then at the end of this video, I will kind of tie both together and kind of put a bow on chapter 1. So what exactly does a game master do anyway? And so that's where he focuses here on. He's going to focus on what are the techniques and the methods and the responsibilities of a game master. All right. The other thing that I mentioned in the previous video is that Gary Gygax, at least through chapters 1 and most of chapter 2, does not mention Dungeon Master at all. All right. He is talking specifically Game Master throughout this entire first 2 chapters of the book. So I'm starting to wonder, maybe that was a fan created term or title that he himself did not use. So at least not in this book here. So let me jump right into it. The Game Master has at least 7 principal functions which are intrinsically connected to the game, its principles and rules, and the technical aspects of play. These functions are as moving force, creator, designer, arbiter, overseer, director, and umpire, referee, judge. A single function with various shades of meaning. The secondary functions of a game master are narrator, interpreter, force of nature, personification of non-participant characters, all other personifications, and a supernatural power. The following is a description of each of these functions. And I will editorialize a little bit and give just some of my own impressions of what these are as well. So the first one, and this one turns out to be very, very important later on in his description. Moving force. The game has many participants, and the GM is the crucial figure amongst the 3 or more players who make up the group. While the game itself While the game itself might be bad or good, the play of the game system is only as good as the ability of the GM to understand and present it. Thus, a moving force, the GM is responsible for mustering players and inspiring continued vitality. He's going to keep on going back to this, the continuing vitality. That is the GM's primary function, is to bring the players to the table and then to have a continued vitality. In other words, keep them wanting to return to that table and continue playing a campaign. And he will go back to the idea of, first the game is important, followed by the campaign, or the idea of a long-term playing session group with with the same group of players, hopefully, and a long-term campaign. So let's continue. For instance, as the instigator of play, the game master may recruit players for the game, guide an already existing group towards a game or system of his own choosing. The greatest threat to the vitality of the gaming group is familiarity and repetition of play, coupled with changes in the player group such as relocation, the pull of other interests, and scholastic or occupational demands. All right, so he's basically saying that, if you're going to bring a group of players to your table, the greatest threat to them having that vitality, in other words, long lasting, is that if your play becomes too repetitious. And so they might become bored, or they may grow other interests and such. So you should be changing up, not necessarily game systems, but you should be changing up what you're presenting to them as far as the playable sessions of your coming together. These factors can all lead to stagnation or the dissolution of the group, often without continued revitalization from the game master. Even the most vigorous efforts at the onset to inspire participation soon fade within the players. As a moving force, the GM initiates and sustains play by inspiring, encouraging, and maintaining vitality and creative energy. The creator. The word may seem inappropriate. After all, the publisher of the RPG system creates, and the GM merely follows. Right? Wrong. At the very least, the game master creates a living realism and interest in the game. Do you as GM devise adventurous scenarios for the player group? If so, you are creating a portion of the system. Did you create a campaign, that is, a whole or portion of the whole world with geography, climate, weather, nations, politics, economics, population, flora, fauna, and so on, in which the player participants use their game participants for many and varied adventurous interactions? If so, you have created a major portion of the game system. Perhaps you took systems and rules and modified them to suit a subgenre or a whole new milieu, such as going from fantasy to science fiction or fantasy, or stepping from modern espionage to future espionage. That approaches what might be called grand creation. A few more changes, and what is the end product is most probably a new and unique game system. So again, he's talking about keeping things fresh and modifying them and introducing the players to new things. However, he does say that if you push it to a great extent, you're actually playing a different game. And I've seen in his other writings that he actually warns about that, and starts saying that, if you're going to play another game, that's fine. If you're going to take Dungeons and Dragons and create another game out of it, that's also fine. But just be aware that you are no longer playing the original game that you thought you were. Whatever the case, the game master is a creator in one critical sense. He or she creates and continues to recreate the tenor and excitement of what the RPG is. The sense of fantasy, wonder, mystery, suspense, danger, and all the rest are created by the dungeon master or game master. When excellence of game meshes with that of the game master, truly enthralling interaction occurs for all participants. The mark of the master game master, however, is the ability to create fun and excitement out of an inferior, incomplete, or faulty game system. All right, so very, very interesting how he makes this argument where, he's acknowledging that you could actually be playing with a faulty system or faulty game mechanics, and only the master game master has the ability to create fun and excitement with that inferior, incomplete, or faulty game system and still move forward, still continue to play and create that vital and continuous draw to your table. Designer. Related to but differing from the role of creator, the game master is required to design and develop rules, subcases, bridging rules, rules expansions, new rules, and possibly subsystems and systems within the overall RPG system. As the participant most knowledgeable about the play group, the play method, campaign, and game system employed, the GM must be skilled in game design. Even the most developed and expansive game system cannot cover everything. The human imagination is too fertile. There are too many unknowns, for the whole concept of role-playing as a game form is too new, and the personalities of the individuals playing too varied. A superior game master devises material as needed, while the one who is the true master GM does so with the benefit of assistance from his player group. Designing efforts prolonging the vitality of the game because they not only complete the RPG system but tailor it to the tastes of the participants involved. So really, really big paragraph here. Again, the talking about the GM as a designer and a true master GM does so with the benefit and assistance of the player group. In other words, the players have some input into what is going on within what the GM is actually designing for them to play in. This is what gives it vitality. This is what is going to lead to long-lasting campaigns. You have to basically listen to your players in order to tailor a campaign, setting, world, whatever you want to call it, that they're willing to continue to participate in. So tailor it to their tastes. And this could be a variety of things from just taking tidbits of their stories and including it in what they're doing to basically just asking them, well, what do you want to do next? All right, which is really a throwback to the 1974 or even earlier with Dave Arneson's contribution to role-playing is by asking, what do you want to do? Well, that's, I believe, incorporated into this portion here. The arbiter. The arbiter, who but the game master is in the position to interpret the spirit, principles, system of rules, and individual game rules correctly, who is more able to answer questions more aptly than the master game master, who determines the answers for his or her own play group or game? No one. Certainly, some players may consider the publisher and possibly the author-designer to be such a final authority. However, neither the publisher nor the author-designer controls and serves as the moving force behind the play group headed by the GM. This is really, really important. This is why I mentioned earlier on that the moving force is something that only the GM has. All right, and it does give that a final authority to the GM to do whatever he or she wants at his or her table. Therefore, what they have to say has no ultimate bearing upon the rule of the game master, and that's referring back to the game designers and authors. All that really matters is that the GM has the option to accept or agree with certain rulings, whether offered by an outside agency or generated within the play group. Being the arbiter is a heavy responsibility, for the success of the group is directly related to the GM's ability to perform this role. Remember that success may be measured by the group's long-term participation and enjoyment of the RPG. I have personally stood before assembled GMs and players pronouncing rules, interpretations, and applying principles, and explaining the systems used in the AD&D game. They received the benefit of my thinking and opinions along with the cautionary note. In the final analysis, you must decide for yourselves what rules you will use. If you employ rules or systems which are different than those put forth in the published game, make certain that all participants know this and understand the differences, then have fun. Because the GM and the play group might well interact in situations which utilize the standard systems as opposed to the variant ones normally employed in the play involving only the group unit, it is useful to know the standard or tournament rules. But house rules are fine, and the GM is the one who will set them down for the others. Now we move on to the role of overseer. Overseer, along with the way the GM reads and knows the rules, the milieu, and the specific setting of the sessions of play. How does the session of play relate to the adventure scenario to the epic, and the epic to the campaign? The game master must oversee the coordination of the game with the action of play and the needs of the group to make sure the longevity and fun of the campaign agree with systems and scenarios at use now and in the future. It might be very enjoyable to reward a group of players for success in a single episode, but that elation will be short-lived, of course, for there is then little purpose in continuing. Expectations must not be continually unattained, but neither must they be continually exceeded. This applies to the internal logic of the RPG world, the campaign milieu, and the particular setting in play. Basically, before I move forward with this, he's basically saying that the game cannot be either too easy or too difficult. Otherwise, your player group is going to lose interest in the campaign. And so that's where the role of the overseer comes in, because you are overseeing the pace of the game, the risk factors of the game, the rewards of the game, the consequences of it, and all of that really does have to strike a balance in order to maintain the vitality of your player group. Overseeing with an eye towards balancing these factors can be quite demanding. However, the master GM will achieve a greater degree of success more frequently than will any less accomplished GM, because he or she knows and understands all of the positions that must be fulfilled and the tasks which need accomplishing. The director. Playing an RPG is very similar to doing improvisational theater. Although the players most frequently improvise the actions of their established characters, they must frequently shift gears and pretend They are not that persona at all, but an entirely different one. In order to slip by the gate guards, says Joan, whose character is a warrior maid, I'll have Darcy, her character, pretend to be a peasant girl leaving the city with the others at the close of the market day. And think of games of espionage, mystery, and the like, where it is the rule rather than the exception when a game character plays other persona. So yeah, basically what he's talking about is that sometimes you might find where your character is playing somebody else, and so this is basically the, I'm the dude playing the dude who thinks he's the other dude kind of thing from Tropic Thunder, right? You are adding personification to your character, who is then personifying themselves in a different character than themselves. And this is, a very challenging thing in order to be able to pull it off. And the GM is there to kind of direct that kind of an interaction with the world by the player, for it to be convincing and believable, and bottom line, for it to be convincing for the NPCs to actually fall for it. The broad outlines of the play are known to the GM and the player group. Then, with direction from the game master and their player characters' interactions within the setting, the group develop their own version of the scenario being played. At the very least, the GM gives cues with the actors may follow. Often, the role of director is also well managed that the whole tenor of the adventure raises itself to epic proportions, whether dramatic, tragic, or comedic, as players respond to the artistry and challenge of the game of the master game master. Direction extends from the broad to the specific, however, in that the game master does very mundane things as director. Because this is a game, the make-believe characters participating in an adventure do not have any senses of their own. Because there is no reality involved, there is nothing in the scenario to be tasted, touched, seen, smelled, or heard anyway. Yet all of the five senses, and often the fabled sixth sense too, function in the RPG because the game master provides this information to the players in their game personas. Thus, he or she may direct them from relaying sensory information. There is a slick wetness to the cobblestones, and your boot heels echo between the jagged edges of the building, says the game master in setting the scene. The scent of the salt water is heavy in the air, and you shiver suddenly, although it is not that cold at night. Then from the corner of your eye you see the flash of a red again. Beyond that, there is a direction of voice stress, expression, body language, and all the rest, because there is no set script to follow, no right way as determined by anyone. Direction at its best is a combination of thoroughness and subtlety, which is mostly undetectable to an outsider. Yeah, so anyone looking in at someone else's game, you're not necessarily going to pick up these nuances that the game master has in his or her mind, and that he or she is kind of relaying to the players. So I think it's very difficult to look at someone else's game and and to make judgments about, well, I would have done it this way, or that's not the way it should have been done, because you don't have the same knowledge and insight into what's going on in that moment. Umpire, referee, and judge. This threefold function places a master GM in a more personal role in the game proceedings. While the role of arbiter is vital to the regulatory supervision, this function focuses on the master GM as a person who must deal with players as individual human beings while maintaining the standards and integrity of the game as a whole. Because the player characters interact with the game system and the scenarios based upon it, they do require some supervision. Since only the GM can know the motives, thoughts, plans, purposes, and reactions of the sentient creatures and beasts encountered during the course of an adventure episode, he or she must deliver the final word on all scenario combats and all the rest of what occurs where activity requires determination of results. The role of Empire, I skipped this line. The role of Empire is not a biased one. The game master must serve as the sole decision maker with respect to the actions as I related to them. Various dice rolls called for by the rules are determined success or failure on some occasions, but often some activity not anticipated by the system and rules will be initiated. As umpire, the GM's rule should consider only the facts and resulting circumstances, whether as probability results expressed by random number generation or arguments of fact and logic. The referee role is very similar to that of umpire, but the focus is on disputes or hostile player character interaction. Let us suppose that in the paranoia game, Slippery wants to substitute a dud energy cell for the weapon carried by Bossy Jerk. The activity involved would fall into the umpire category, but a resulting dispute later, wherein Slippery and Bossy Jerk deal directly with one another, is very much the purview of the referee. The game master must handle these types of interactions in an impartial and judicial manner. The game master also determines rewards for character performance in adventure scenarios. This role of judge does not normally extend to the division of spoils taken during the course of play. If there is a dispute there, it is the referee who intercedes. But in this last capacity, the game master comments on the strengths and weaknesses of each character's play and gives each player character the awards and honors he or she sees fit. In some game systems, this might mean the distribution of points towards an increase in professional skill or personal statistics, or an increase in rank, level, or other such status. Going back to Slippery and in the paranoia example, that character's assumption of the team leader role after the demise of Bossy Jerk, plus a further successful discovery of a commie mutant traitor, might result in the award of several skill points and the promotion. I just lost my line, I'm sorry. And the promotion from red to orange status for Slip, ruining and perfectly good name in the process. Slippery doesn't quite cut it, but that's progress for you. All right, so he went from slippery to slippery. Slippery, not sure where that's coming from. The function of the judge is a very important one for the action of the GM in this capacity is a measure of his or her overall skill. Too few or too many awards will be seen as a sign of weakness or that the GM is being unfair or showing favoritism. Player participation do their own judging, of course, and the game master is rated continually throughout the course of the activity, but never so critically as in the case when he or she serves as judge at the conclusion of an adventure scenario. So basically, how a GM awards both experience points or magic items or whatever, that is being judged by the players, and if it seems to be unfair, that's going to be a real red flag and be difficult to get over, that circumstance. If it's considered to be too easy to get those things, the players are going to lose interest in the scenario or the campaign because there's just not enough risk there. It's too easy of a game for them to play, and it becomes a waste of time. If it is too difficult, they will become frustrated, feel that their character's progression is being stagnated artificially, potentially, and once again, they lose interest in continuing the campaign. Be sure you understand these principal functions of the GM before you read on. The secondary functions are very closely related to the primary ones and usually occur simultaneously. The main differences between the 7 primary and the 6 secondary functions is that another individual or individuals could function in each of these secondary roles in place of the game master with no loss of continuity in the campaign or scenario. Let us examine each of these secondary functions and determine how the responsibility for these might be removed from the GM. So you have a narrator. All right, whether the information is from a prepared text or otherwise, the role of narrator is integral to any RPG and is adjunctive to the duty of director. Dramatic, clear, and exciting narration built up much of the mystique of the game. Commercially prepared adventure scenarios and those which the GM has written himself will have portions which are to be read aloud to the player participants. In other cases, the GM might relate material directly from his own notes or spontaneously off the top of his head, having been inspired by player actions. This aspect of narrator is closer to improvisational theatrical work. An interpreter. Both expansion and clarification of the rules fall into the interpretive category of game interaction. Questions which might be forthcoming are often anticipated by the astute game master. Actual questions are also interpreted in a neutral, absolutely disinterested fashion. Have you ever seen such a device, monster, phenomenon before? One player might ask. The GM is cognizant of exactly what the player characters are experiencing, but because he or she is also aware of the limitations of the situation, the answer will be clear but couched in terms which require the player to rely only on the information known to his or her game persona. In other words, when a player asks what can they see, the GM has to answer with what that player character could reasonably see in that situation. Don't give them any additional information that the player character would not be able to know of, would not be able to observe it, hear it, smell it, taste it, whatever. They just have no experience in it, are not witnessing it at the time. Don't give them that information. What you can do is give them a tip if you knew that they had encountered something like this before and the player just happens to be forgetting it. Do you recall anything similar? Is a prompt that you can give to the player. The GM reiterates previous material, possibly augmenting it in consideration of the question asked. Merely relating text or extemporaneous material or giving sensory data will not serve when the player group requires additional information regarding such information. So again, just don't blurt out stuff that they couldn't possibly know. Try to get them to remember. If they did, they will feel much more of an accomplishment from remembering, oh yeah, I do remember, and especially if they're talking in terms of their character does remember encountering a troglodyte before. And so now they know some methods that they might have to use in combating troglodytes to avoid some of the special abilities that troglodytes have. Therefore, additional interpretation input given in response to the query is likely to be more helpful and realistic. When supplied by a secondary game master for each of the player personas is individual and has different perspectives and varying abilities. So others can apply interpretation to what is going on in this, and it's often sometimes best to have these conversations in order to sort these things out. So in character, the player can have his character speak to another player character and ask her, what do you remember this, and just involve them. And if she was in place and still kind of forgetting what was going on, that's where the GM can once again, well, do you remember this other incident that was very similar? And now you can relay that information to the player. So this interpretive interaction can mix and match throughout the rest of the group. I'm going to just move on to the force of nature. The GM controls everything about the nature of the world. So earthquakes, rain, snow, cold, and so on and so on. I'm not going to go into very much detail here. Bottom line, the DM decides what is, what's the weather outside. And then the players either have to modify what their characters are doing to address it, or the GM will provide them opportunities to work around it, or consequences if they don't. So give them, greater challenges and difficulties due to inclement weather or whatnot. Personification, the three remaining secondary areas of duty can be discussed as if they were one category. I'm going to really consolidate this because we are kind of running a little bit long now. The personification of non-player characters is very important skill for the GM to develop. And it's very, very important for them to create NPCs and to personify them in a way that they seem to be genuine. And this is especially true when the player characters are interacting with these NPCs over a long period of time or in multiple instances. So if they, and in the original video I had mentioned this and I'm going to reiterate it, if the player character group is staying in a particular tavern in a city that they've been using as a hub for adventure for quite some time, and let's say they've gone in and out of this tavern 17 times, and on the 18th time they approach the tavern keeper and he has exactly the same personality as he had done in the previous 17 meetings that they had with him. It's not a realistic personification of that NPC. And the players are going to kind of, even if they don't express that they recognizing that, they're certainly going to feel it. And so the world is not going to feel as alive to them because you're not presenting them with NPCs that are growing with time. The NPC might be in a bad mood today, and he wasn't in the previous meetings. And that might even prompt the players to ask, hey, what's going on? Uh, it might lead to another adventure hook or whatever. So it's very, very important that personification is being done well by the game master, and that the game master is thinking, you know what, like any other interaction that you have in the real world. I mean, just imagine the real world. You know, every time you go into a store that you go into frequently, you're going to kind of know the mood and the, you know, some of the motivations and just the personality traits of that store owner. And if they're dramatically different on any given day, then you're going to be, hey, you know, what's going on, kind of thing. You can take that, what you expect in the real world, and transfer that to your fantasy world, and create. That's what makes it feel authentic. Is that, you know, non-player characters are dynamic for the players when they're meeting them. So again, and I know it's a very easy pit trap to fall into, that you kind of get lazy about it, or you weren't really thinking it through as much. But it is certainly something that even experienced game masters will oftentimes forget or not realize as important as it might be. And so they kind of gloss over that. And I certainly do that on occasion as well. But having read this again for the second or third time now in a couple of days, I'm certainly going to get back to doing that again. My garage door is opening, so hopefully you're not getting disturbed too much by that. Finally, the supernatural power roll. All right. The GM is the most powerful deity sitting at the table. I can't say it any other way. They are doing the personification of everything in the world, whether it's a creature, a sentient sword, a NPC. They control everything. The GM controls everything that is in that world, and and that creates, or it's up to them to take all of these different functions that they have and relate it in a way that it makes the world seem real. So the GM, I'm just reading down in this last part over here, the GM is not a mere reader or keeper of the rules. He is the principal force which motivates all other participants in the RPG experience, builds their interest, sustains it, heightens the dramatic realism of the play, and actively participates in the course of the game. The game master is the power above all other powers in the game, the sole and final arbiter. He or she is also everything else, the whole entire universe of the campaign, which is not played or represented by a playing participant. The master game master can bring about the elevation of the elevation of poor and mediocre players far more easily than can a group of player participants improve the ability of an inept game master. The game is only as good as its game master in role playing, and that demands far greater skills than are called for to demonstrate masterful playing ability as a player. Persona, I'm sorry. Yet a master game master must by definition also remain a disinterested party. In other words, a balanced or fair, objective individual. Being disinterested does not mean being aloof. It does not mean being impartial. It does mean being impartial, active in all aspects of participation to some degree, and very much sharing in the triumphs and tragedies of the character group after the conclusion of play. I actually feel their pain and feel their triumphs in real time as my player group is actually playing the game, or when I roll a die and I roll a critical hit against the player. I feel it. I feel it for them. And when they roll a natural 20, I'm as excited as they are that they've done it. And so this is something that doesn't just happen at the conclusion of the game. This happens in real time, or at least it should. And then we get to the other part. So who can be a master game master? And I spoke about that in the other portion of the video. So hopefully this re-recording, really helps you hear some of my, ideas, some of Gary Gygax's ideas, and my interpretations of them. If you watch the second video, you notice that I had some disagreements with where he was going with it. Far less so here. I mean, I think that these principles that he laid out is integral to being a very good game master. One thing I want to talk about is, and I did it briefly in the first video of this series. I wanted to talk about the difference between being a game master and being and having mastery as a game master, because you could see that Gary was actually talking about being a master game master and being a game master, and he did not use them interchangeably. There was definitely a step up in ability from being a game master to being a master game master. And so that's where he gets a little bit more into it with, in the second part. And in part 3, which I'm certainly going to do separately from this, it's the beginning of chapter 2, when it talks about measuring the game master. So master, when he's talking about, is you're the master of your table. Mastery is a qualitative measurement that we get into chapter 3. So that will be the next chapter that I produce for the channel, and you can give that a listen to. So if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're returning from the first time that I tried it, I hope that this sounds a lot better for you and you can hear it better. And if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them. And what I will do is, with that older video, I will archive it, and that way it's not just another redundant video in the series here. And once again, enjoy the rest of your weekend. Thank you for joining. Thumbs up if you enjoyed this video. Please like and share if you and subscribe if you haven't done that already. And I look forward to seeing you on a gaming screen sometime soon. You'll have a great afternoon.